Hello, I'm Marc Sumner, host of the Channel Tap podcast show, and today I have the pleasure, actually in the morning I have the pleasure, because it's 9 o'clock in the morning here, of Bob Sahota, the sales director of Highgate IT Solutions in the studio. How are we doing, Bob?
I'm good, thank you, Mark. I'm actually nervous. I'm sitting here, I'm going, oh my God, I'm on the other end of this. Normally we're used to, like I said to you at the beginning, we're used to seeing this on LinkedIn and all the socials, and you get to see all of the big names here, and it feels nice to be here, actually. So thanks for inviting me.
No, your pleasure, absolute pleasure. So I want to take you back. I ask most guests this. I want to take you back to the start of how you actually kicked off your IT sales career, because most people I speak to, they don't normally have IT or sales as their first choice. So tell me how you entered the industry.
So sales, before I got into IT sales, I got into sales when I was 16. So I finished school, didn't go into college, didn't go into uni. It was more from necessity, needed to go out and earn. So I went out there and got myself a door-to-door job selling gas and electric.
Wow, that's a tough gig.
Tough gig. And I think it was probably the best grounding I could have hoped for. I mean, knocking doors and selling 100% commission. So there's no basics involved. If you don't sell, you don't earn. So that was a really good grounding. I think I did that for about 3 years. So it's it was a good chance for me to learn.
Commission only from 16 to 19 for 3 years.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, when you're doing it, you don't really realise it's a tough gig. You look back on it, you go, bloody hell, that must have been hard. I mean, trying to do that now, you couldn't convince me to do that now. But at the time, you just think it's normal. Well, you don't know what normal is at that age, do you? You just know that you've got to earn money, and you're seeing other people do it. Luckily, I had a bit of a mentor in my brother-in-law who was in the same industry, and he kind of showed me the ropes a little bit. I just took to it. I enjoyed being out there, being a little bit free, not being very rigid in an approach, and just talking to people. I like talking to people.
Was there any months you struggled? You thought, actually, I can make ends meet. I've got a blank.
There weren't. Do you know what? I don't know why. I think it was probably because I enjoyed it. I think if you enjoy the work, you can normally do quite well at it. And I enjoyed the work. It didn't feel like work at the time. Again, I'm a child at 16 years old. You don't know what's right or what's wrong, but I know that I enjoyed it. And I also liked being around older people that were quite successful, or what I thought were successful people, because they seemed to have all the things that I wanted as well. So it was, a good part of my career that I always look back on fondly. It's great.
And then how did you get into IT? Because that's where everyone thinks the big money's in IT sales.
I didn't have a clue about IT, didn't know anything about the IT industry, the channel, nothing. I replied to, I think it was an ad in a paper, and it was Simply Computers, actually, back in the day. So I don't know if you remember them.
Yeah, I do.
But it was what eventually became the old Misco. I think it was an ad in a paper, and it was an open day. I genuinely don't know what I had actually applied for, but we turned up, and it was maybe 25 of us in a room, and it was proper old school open day. Like, you got 4 or 5 directors there, and they sell me this pen and all of that old school stuff. And it got to the halfway point on that open day, and I remember they shouted out a load of names, and they were like, can you go into that room? And the other half, they stayed in that room. And that lot were gone. That was it. They just decided at the halfway point, from what they had seen, that half of them people weren't going to cut it for them. They were like, right, you're done. And then anyway, so we went through the whole process, and I ended up going through that. And I think they took on 7 or 8 of us, Simply Computers. Still know some of them today. I mean, Trevor Hilton's probably the one that I still talk to now. That was part of that group.
It's funny, I used to run open days for Cisco and Ideal Hardware back in the day, and exactly the same method. I'd bring 20 people to the hiring table at 9 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
At 10:30, I had to literally call out 10 names or 15 names, bring them in, and it was almost like X Factor saying, sorry, you haven't made it, you've got to go home. And I'd actually convince them to stay there the whole day. And some of them would be like, why, what have I done? It's like, you haven't really impressed them enough, etc., etc. At lunchtime, the same thing would happen. Unfortunately, in the group discussion, you haven't impressed them, you've got to go home. And then there'd be the final 3 or 4 that got the job. Today, that doesn't really happen now. I don't run open days like that, and people don't get sort of like cut quite quickly. It's harsh. Do you think that's a good thing? Do you think that was such a good grounding for people? Because I'm looking now for people for doing interviews. It's quite an easy gig to get a job now. It's actually just apply and you normally have a conversation, and it's quite an easy way in to get a job. What's your feeling on that now? Because it's a harsh environment doing open days, but they don't really do them no more.
I've never seen it other than in that one time. I'm not sure whether or not. I don't think it sits well with me. I don't particularly like the idea of it. I think it's a really strong, harsh way of doing things. I'm sure it's great for the employer. They get what they want. They get quite a lot of candidates to start off with, and then they can pick and choose whoever they want. So, like I say, it's maybe better for the employer, but a bit strong on the candidates, especially the ones that don't make it.
No, absolutely. So you obviously got in, and then you joined. You got through the day. What was the job like when you actually started? Talk to me about your career there at Simply Computers.
So we sat downstairs. We spent a couple of weeks with a guy called Jim Bates, who just skilled us up because we didn't know anything. We had no clue about components and the things that we were meant to sell. But we got a couple of weeks in a room downstairs where Jim basically talked us through a catalogue and told us what things were. And that was pretty much it. And it was right, go up and sell. That was it. That was it. There wasn't a huge induction. There wasn't a sales program. There wasn't a guide on how you could do things and what you need to do and in what order. It was a case of go out, find accounts, call them. But it sounds hard. If you tell people to do that now, just as that, I think it's quite difficult. But something about the job back then was easy. It really was easy. When you're calling out people and you're just saying, I'm calling from Simply, it's quite a well-known name back then because they had the catalogue and everyone loved the Simply catalogue. They've all got it on their desks or at home. And then just to call them up and tell them that you're offering them an account manager service where you can offer them better prices. It was groundbreaking at the time.
We'll take your phone call and we'll offer you it cheaper.
Brilliant. What's the catch? So as difficult as it sounds in today's world, back then I think it was easy. Much easier.
Do you think it's tougher now for people to break into sales? Do you think that's...
the market's tougher now. There's so many more resellers. I don't think there was a huge amount of competition back then. It never felt like there was you had some of the big names and the regular ones that you'd come across, but it was like the Dabs of the world, and Insight was still knocking around. But now there's so much fierce competition. The market is saturated with resellers, I feel like. And
let's move on with your career. So you'd obviously been into reseller, and then you moved into management, am I right?
Yeah, so if you fast forward, that's fast forwarding from the age of 19, 20, all the way through to 31, 32.
That's when you got
it was when I joined Total.
That was your first management opportunity?
First management role.
How did you feel about that? Because you'd been a successful biller at Misco. You'd built a book, you've done all the hard graphs, and then you go into management.
You don't actually... I went into it with quite a lot of self-doubt.
Really?
Well, just because you've sold a load before, you can be a top biller somewhere and you can sell plenty. Does that mean you can teach it? And not just be able to teach it, but does that mean that you can manage people? These are the big questions that go through your mind. And again, I'm looking at it two ways. That's me looking at it now. There's some of the things that I think I looked back on. But at the time, I was also a bit fearless with it. I knew I had some doubts, but at the same time, I was like, I'm just going to make this work. I almost didn't think that I would struggle. I didn't know what the struggles would look like. There were plenty of challenges along the way, never having done it before. But I know it all came together for some reason.